Welcome to Le Grande Bouffe,
The Big Feast.
with myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy. We are here, as always, to copiously consume international culture and politics through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer every week. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing all right. A little hungover, to be honest.
Yeah, I know that feeling. And it's also really hot, which makes hangovers that much worse.
Yeah, you got to stay hydrated. You got to take your vitamins. You got to not go out after a comedy show in Brooklyn and do things that were fun at the time at a little spot called the Johnsons off the Jefferson L train. Give a shout out to that.
Nice. And anything you do not drop dead in the middle of Macy's.
Yeah, Cole, do you want to tell the story a little bit?
So I was shopping with my wife in Macy's Midtown, 34th and 6th Ave yesterday, and I was going down the escalator from the mezzanine, and I see this body in the middle of the floor, the main floor of Macy's, the first floor, and there's this black woman laid out, and there's two employees there, one with a little red first aid bag. The woman's kind of kneeling down. The guy's just standing there. And no one's making any attempt to get this woman to wake up or anything. And so curious Cole, I walk around to see, what's going on with this lady, this poor woman. And she's got her fist gnarled in a really tight fist, so that she's a black lady, but her knuckles look really white. And so I stood there and I just watched her very carefully for probably a good 40, 50 seconds just to see what...
You're checking to see like her breath?
Yeah, at that point I was moving. Yeah, and nothing.
Wow.
Nothing.
Crazy.
DOA, dead in Macy's.
Is that what DOA stands for?
Dead on arrival. Dead on arrival at Macy's.
That's awful. That's crazy.
It was terrible.
Have you ever been working someplace and had someone pass away or something crazy like that happen?
I have. I was working at the Pan Pacific Hotel as a banquet waiter in San Francisco for an evening function. And it was weird because I had just been to Mexico that day. So I just got rushed back from Mexico, from Tijuana, to get to my shift. And I get there, and about 45 minutes into the shift, it's a dinner function for some banking group, so it's a bunch of old white people. But this guy just all of a sudden he's sitting in his chair, and his chair goes all the way back, and he hits the floor. Wow. He had a heart attack, and there was a doctor in the room, and he came over and did CPR and the whole bit. But bye-bye.
I'm gonna say something that doesn't seem very intelligent sounding, but people die all the time. People die in airplanes all the time. They're all dying everywhere. And
it's part of life.
You hear the stories from like the family's perspective of like, yeah, he was pushing a cart through the TJ Maxx and he just passed out onto the tie rack. But then of course there's 50 people who are like, yeah, I was at the TJ Maxx and hear this loud noise and this old, so it's strange. Well, that's as good of a cold open as any that we've had. What are you drinking over there? I'm gonna be honest. I'm taking a sip. It's more of a hair of the dog than a real indulgence. But
well, I wanted to take it easy on you today anyway, and so I got the Founders All Day IPA,
I drink this all the time.
Which is a session IPA, which means that you can drink it and not really get plastered or too hungover, even if you've had 5 or 6 of them. It looks like I believe the ABV is about 5. I'm not finding it too easily.
I bet you've told me
the bottle
on this podcast, but I'm all about reinforcement. What does a session mean? Does lower ABV?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Means you can drink it while you're fishing and not wreck your boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these. They're nice and they're sort of they got a little citrusy freshness to them.
Yeah, very refreshing.
There's I'm just calling out cool places I like. Father Knows Best in Bushwick. I get my all days from Casey and sit in the back and read a book, and that's what I'm usually doing on my weekends.
Nice. Yeah, very good. Well, we're here today to talk about kind of a perfect movie to watch on a holiday or a staycation if you're ever having one of those. And it's called The In-Laws.
Yeah, this is a great movie. I somehow this movie's not wasn't in the pantheon to me of like late 70s great comedies, but this is great. It's got some people I love. Peter Falk, Columbo, killing it as the comedic side of this two-hander.
It's the funniest thing he's ever done. He's so funny in this movie. And the scenes, Arthur Hiller directed it, and the tempo of the movie is great. This is the movie hits the ground running, and it just doesn't let up. It just gets crazier and kookier, and it is really about these in-laws. The movie is really a bromance. I think this is one of the earliest bromances, because really the whole movie is about this relationship of characters and the actors themselves, Peter Falk and Alan Arkin, who were pals before they made this movie, and you can tell they're just having the time of their life making this flick.
It's obviously cuts such a pattern for movies like this. I think it's most reminiscent to me of like Analyze This and Analyze That. I think that's a really similar one where De Niro is the crazy, like sort of more ethnic and interesting side character to Billy Crystal, who is totally channeling Alan Arkin in those movies. And then there's like, a good dozen movies like that where these two unlikely people get stuck together. Like what there's one with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart, like Ride Along is essentially the same thing.
Right. Well, and also, it's Arthur Hiller, and the movie that he made before this was Silver Streak with Gene Wilder and, of course, the late, great Richard Pryor. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a great movie, too. Silver Streak is awesome, really funny.
They
70s
did
comedy.
like 5 or 6 of those, right?
I know
the Wilder Pryor combos.
I don't think they did that many, but they did do a few. I think Silver Streak is maybe the best of the bunch. It's got an incredible action climax. I don't want to give it away, but a rather large vehicle crashes through something.
Well, you could be describing this movie too. So just to give it the old log line, it's basically Alan Arkin's daughter is marrying a young man. They've never met the in-laws, and when they do, they love the family, except the father-in-law is a bit eccentric. He's got some interesting stories. And
about the mosquitoes carrying off the babies in some third world country. And there's a lot of lines that evidently people memorize from this movie, and one is about the mosquitoes had beaks.
Alan Arkin's like, beaks. They had beaks.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. They had beaks.
It's quite. You had to be there to see it.
Yeah, that's the introductory scene where the family, the Arkin's families, meet Peter Falk's character for the first time in the dining room, and so let's just talk a little bit about I guess I'll give it the IMDb summary just so you guys can have the parameters of the plot. In preparation for his daughter's wedding, dentist Sheldon Cornpet
Shelley
meets Vince Ricardo, the groom's father, of course played by Peter Falk. Vince, a maniac fellow who claims to be a government agent, then proceeds to drag Sheldon into a series of chases and misadventures from New York to Central America to a fictional.
fictitious. It really sounds like Tijuana, but it's not. It's Tajana or something like that. It's a fake country, and first I was wondering why they got to fake it, and then it's such an elaborate, like over the top farce that's happening there. You think they'd probably get in trouble if they name check a real country.
Yeah, it's there's so many great lines in it, and a lot of the there is a good amount of suspense in the movie, just because you're really not sure whether Peter Falk's character is just this complete nutcase who's just making everything up, or if he really does have ties to the CIA and really does have a clue about the stuff that he's up to. So the movie starts off with a robbery, and so you really think it's going to be a heist flick. These guys are robbing an armored truck, but they're not interested in the cash.
Yeah, it's a Treasury Department truck. Yeah.
Yeah, they're interested in the plates. It's the printing plates for, I think it's $1,000 bills. I don't even know if they print those anymore.
Yeah, well, like, one nitpick that'll have in this movie is how much space money takes up. Like, at one point, they get $20 million and they split it up in different ways.
Yeah.
And the second $10 million is about a tenth the size of the other $10 million, and they're all $1,000 bills. And I did the math, which I should be able to do without my calculator, but $1 million in $1,000 bills is still 1,000 bills.
Right.
That's like handed out in the form of a single envelope.
Yeah, it's in a package.
Yeah.
It's in a little package. The first 10 million's in a big briefcase that you would expect to hold that much money, and then Peter Falk and Alan Arkin each get their little packs. Have they split the second 10 million? Maybe they each have 5 million.
They're handed two things of $5 million, and then they distribute it to. We don't give it away, but they then give that to people, and they do it in a very ridiculously. I mean, I'm nitpicking here. It's whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. So like, I love Peter Falk. I watch a lot of Columbo on A&E. A&E used to be a great channel, you guys. Like, boy, back in my day, they used to show Murder, She Wrote and Quincy M.E. So that's why I'm like a Jack Klugman, like ride or die, motherfucker. And there's a lot of Columbo on that.
Love Columbo.
Tell me your history with Peter Falk, because that's someone who I think we should all be obsessed with, the way we're into like Bill Murray and people like that.
I kind of want to back into it because I was walking down Madison Avenue probably 10 years ago or so before Peter Falk died, and I look in the window of this diner, and there's Peter Falk sitting in the diner eating a sandwich, and I was
in a raincoat.
I can't speak to what it could have been. A ring, who knows what he was wearing, but it was just so.
It was a raincoat, Cole.
It could have been. It was such a great, inspirational moment, because just seeing that guy, there was something about his spirit that just.
His eyes are so like funny, and they're both squinting, but to different degrees.
There's just so much kindness. He was one of those people who just exuded kindness, and of course. He was one of John Cassavetes' stable actors back in the day in the 60s, and so most of John Cassavetes' early films feature Peter Falk, and some of them in pretty big roles. Woman Under the Influence, he has a major role opposite Jenna Rollins as the husband.
Yeah, he can kind of do it all. He can be a really compelling dramatic actor.
He did a lot of Broadway. He was a big stage guy. He did everything. He was one of those just workman actors who just was always working and never turned in a weak performance.
Did you watch Columbo? That's obviously the role that like.
I did. I was a big fan, and when in the 70s, I stopped watching television when I was in high school. I gave up on television because I thought girls were a lot more interesting and a better way to spend my time.
All right, cool, Cole.
Yeah, well, it paid off and it didn't. But
I guess it sounds like you didn't have HBO growing up.
Yeah, that's for sure. But they had all these shows. Columbo was part of this series of shows that would switch out I think it was every Tuesday night. So there'd be Banachek or Columbo. Or the Rockford Files.
Was Kojak on, or
no, Kojak was not one of that. Was not one of that series. Kojak was its own standalone series, but
so this
Banachek was with George Peppard, and McLeod was another one.
So
and
yeah, that's
Columbo.
A format that doesn't really. These were these, and a lot of them were movies, right? Like they were.
I don't think so. I think they were all part of this television. Interchanging series. There were maybe 5 or 6. I don't know how many there were exactly.
So you did one Columbo like a month or something like that.
Exactly. That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You need to do more of that because they were quality.
They were all great. They were all really good. And I remember liking the Banachek stuff a lot too. But I think Rockford Files came out. And then I think maybe Rockford Files became its own show. But I think the Rockford Files, I could be wrong about this, but I think it
I
started
thought the Rockford
as
Files
one of those.
was its own show. Who was on the Rockford Files? It was that's a big name. Well, when you looked it up, so what's great about Columbo, and you can see traces of it in what he's doing in the In-Laws, is he always seemed very clueless. He was always just like asking sort of these like non sequitur questions, like, "Excuse me, ma'am, I don't mean to bother you, but I'm just kind of confused. So, did you have your glasses, or did you not have your glasses?"
It is such a classic example of creating a character, of what's like the Stanislavski definition of creating a character, and that's what Peter Falk always did. He was, I think in a lot of Hollywood films, you see actors who have just they've created this Hollywood character for themselves, and it's just a standard. No matter what movie you put them in, they're always playing themselves. But
what the character is to me is someone who's constantly making you underestimate them, and you see him in like all of these different shows, and every time you're like, yeah, maybe he is crazy, maybe he is like a bumbling idiot, and he's got it all wrong. And the tension, like with Columbo, and it's a similar thing with the In-Laws, is he actually going to be able to pull this off? And like, how is he tricking me? And sort of, that I don't know what it is.
Well, it adds a whole nother. I mean, it's certainly something that you're not going to see on Rizzoli and Isles. He
Shots fired.
He's using nothing against Rizzoli and Isles, very entertaining show for many people, and myself included. But it speaks to perhaps a style of private investigators or any kind of investigator, where people they use deception as a way to interrogate suspects, or to question suspects, and to get clues. And so it's a very disarming device. And I think that there are people that use that kind of stuff in real life, of course, because why wouldn't you?
There's something where you're tricking the audience in these stories more, and that's in the In-Laws too. Is there's a lot of information withheld inside of Peter Falk's character, and that can be done in a really cheap way, but somehow he's so lovable. Because if this was played more straight, and you just had an actor who just wasn't telling you the reality of what was happening, you would be like, well, of course there's tension, because they're just not communicating.
But they also blow that whole thing apart. I love the diner scene where they're yelling at each other.
That's amazing.
And Peter Falk is just yelling about how much money he stole and how he worked for the CIA, and he's giving all this stuff away, and everyone in the diner is looking at them like, you guys are nuts. But as audience members, it makes you really squirm, because you think, if you saw someone doing that in a diner, you'd be looking around for where are the cops that are going to arrest these guys right this second.
The movie's meta in that respect, because there's all of the on all of these scenes that you see in movies where people are yelling at each other in public and they're laying at it. Everyone just seems to be ignoring it and not paying attention. And these people, they almost look like the extras did not know this is going to happen. They think that Arkin and Falk are having a fight, and they're like, oh my God, what in the world is happening?
Yeah.
Let's jump on to Alan Arkin a little bit.
So Alan Arkin is the straight man. He's the dentist. He's drives a BMW. He's got the nice kind of mini mansion in New Jersey. And Peter Falk. Here's a plot question that I had. You're talking about, like, plot problems with the plot. Why does Peter Falk's character leave the printing plate in Arkin's basement?
So there can be an Act 3.
That doesn't make any sense, because that's not, it's like he's setting that aside for himself, maybe.
Well, that would not be out of character, I suppose.
Right.
But I don't know if there's like a real great reason for that.
But by the way, James Garner, I did just want to get it straight for
the Rockford Files.
For the Rockford Files, and that was, yeah.
Did you find out that the Rockford Files was part of that? They should do more things like that.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at Banachek, and I'm trying to find about the the structure of how they folded in those stories, because television was so great in the 70s.
Were they interconnected? Like, were they in like
No, they didn't
shared universe or anything?
No, they did not show up on each other's shows, but they were. I think they were all private investigators. McLeod, Banachek, Columbo. I think they were all private investigators.
Did you watch Quincy? No, I'm just off topic. But did you watch Quincy ME?
I think I remember it, and I certainly have seen it, but that was right around the time that I stopped watching television.
That show has made me to this day want to live on a houseboat. Guys, go.
But
watch.
somehow James Garner didn't make you want to live in a mobile home.
I've never seen Rockford Files.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to check it out. It was great. It's a great show.
He lives in a mobile.
Yeah, he lives in a crappy mobile home.
Oh.
But he drives like a Camaro. Drives a cool muscle
all these
car.
like I don't know what these private eyes in these shows were making, because they often had these like sick cars. Like, were they independently wealthy on Miami Vice? Like, what? Like, did they just an exorbitantly funded homicide department, or like Vice Squad, I guess, down there? They're clearly skimming. Can we talk about this? They're clearly skimming.
Sure. Well, and now we know that that's been going on for a long time. Cops, whenever they bust you, they take your cash, and guess what?
Civil forfeiture.
It disappears. But I did want to just quote the movie. There's flames on my car.
He's got to like hide his car. So of course the place he drives into is a car detailing shop. And he comes out, and it's been like 30 seconds, and they have these cars, and the attendant's like, he's like, "Ooh, you're gonna love these. These are permanent. They never come off.
You can't paint over them.
You can't paint over them, because that's how paint works."
Right.
But it's
and so Arkin gets on the phone to Falk, and he's complaining about this dire situation that he's been tossed into now, where the pokey are coming after him. And he says, his quote is, "There's flames on my car." And of course, Peter Falk's character says, I don't know what you mean by that.
I don't know what you keep talking about these flames. Something that's really funny about, so like Arkin's character is somebody, he's got a cool head on his shoulders.
He's a dentist.
He's a dentist. He's a family man. And then as things like escalate, his emotions seem somewhat appropriate. But then also the funny thing about his character is he gets like a sort of goes catatonic like several different times.
Sure.
Like he's in probably about a dozen gunfights in about 2 days, and eventually he's
serpentine.
Serpentine. It's a real thing. You were in Virginia during the DC sniper thing. People every time you'd pump gas, like you'd seriously hear people's parents, and yet I wonder if there was actually like a in-laws reference. I didn't realize it. They'd be like, "Jimmy, give me $20 a regular. Serpentine, get out there. Zigzag. It's a real thing. People are being knocked out, but it works.
Yeah. Well, there you go, and it's makes for a very ridiculously funny slapstick.
Probably my favorite part is, so they're saying like they're telling him this. Falk is telling Arkin to serpentine into the car, and then he gets in the car and he's like, "You weren't serpentining," so he gets out of the car and he does the serpentine, and then he gets back.
I think it's because he left his bag. He had to go back for the bag.
He
or
definitely
something.
at one point just is like, "Oh, I'm supposed to do that." Okay.
So I think that this movie, as far as genres go, I think that it falls under the screwball comedy genre, which you don't see too many of those. But screwball comedy has these just completely wild, over the top things where you have these characters like the Dictator, and I do want to talk about the Dictator, yeah.
Because prior to the Dictator, Peter Falk is, I think, kind of the only
General Garcia.
Peter Falk is like the almost like supernatural element in it. Like he's the weirdo that's causing this. Everyone else is sort of in the real world, and he is. You think he might be insane, so he's just sort of like wrench in the system. Then you meet General Garcia, and it almost like vowed is okay. Maybe Peter Falk is not alone in this world of craziness.
And right, and so Richard Garcia is played by this actor Richard Libertini, who is a great character actor who was in a lot of movies. He was in Fletch, he was in Days of Heaven, he was in Nell, Awakenings. He's deceased now. He just died this year, but He on IMDb he has 118
Wow.
films to his credit, and he's the icing on the cake in this movie.
He's like if F. Murray Abraham like came up in Second City.
And there's a great scene where he's pouring water. He has a little.
Oh, yeah, let's qualify this. So he's got a person on his hand.
Yeah, right. He's got the little eyes drawn. If you people have done it where you put your thumb across the part of your index finger and you can make a little mouth, and so he puts lips there and he has little eyes.
Yeah, he's like a Steve Martin like character, like lunatic who's running this poor country. So they wind up, they're there to sell him these plates to get money from him. So some of that money goes into back into certain agencies. I'm trying not to give tons of things away, but also, like, you know what I realized that I never think about in movies like this? All that money is like the poor people of the country's money. Like it's like a victory when it's like sort of won, but I'm like, this isn't like drug dealers' money. This isn't like stealing from the government. You know, it's like it's in all these movies where people wind up with like a windfall like this.
Well, there is, in all fairness, there is some political satire going on. I mean, they're really roasting the American influence in third world countries in the way that the CIA puts their fingers in the pie of everyone else's.
Totally. Ricardo Peter Falk keeps his safe behind a picture of Kennedy, which says something like, we gave it our best shot.
Yeah, well, Peter Falk's character was working with Kennedy on the Bay of Pigs, and that went south. And I think that in the storyline, that adds a little bit of grit to the narrative.
In context too. This is one of those episodes where we're just like naming things that we like. But do you remember 78 when this came out? Like what it was in the sort of environment of comedies? You were naming Hiller's other movies, which
right.
The Wilder prior movies.
Well, I can tell you, one of the things I keep going back to the bromance aspect of it, because one of the tropes of screwball comedies is that they revolve around an apparently incompatible couple, and typically it's a male-female couple, but in this case it's these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me is the real magic of this movie, because as much as Alan Arkin's character disbelieves Falk's character is like, he comes off like an open book. He's like a Labrador or something, or golden retriever. I mean, he's just always very happy and really likes, clearly, he respects Alan Arkin's character, and he's not really out to kill him, even though it seems like it a lot of the time.
Yeah, this is I think you could teach a lesson on writing one of these comedies based on this. If you just take a list of attributes, that they're definitely like polar to each other, and I get when you think on paper, there's a bit of, well, they both learn from each other, but I think really like 90% of the time, it's the straight man just learns to have more fun, and like the moral of these movies is like, hey, have fun, fucking like drive cars off cliffs, like just rappel from a helicopter, and there's go watch the movie, but also I don't think it's a surprise to anybody is that there is a wedding at the end, and it really feels like it's the two father-in-laws getting married.
It does. So anyway, the point of this podcast is that this is just a delightful movie, and I from what I understand from listening to some of the quotes from the director's commentary with the actors, a lot of people like to listen to this movie, like to watch this movie around Thanksgiving every year,
or totally get into that, yeah.
Or Christmas Eve, and it really strikes me as a perfect movie for a holiday when you've got the family around and you want something that's really family friendly and just great fun.
If you've been to an Apatow movie the last couple of years, if I told you that Jonah Hill and Jason Segel were in a movie together, go watch the source material, which is The In-Laws, which does it, did it with 30, how does time work? It did it close to 40 years ago, and it did
Yeah.
it better than any of the stuff out right now.
Absolutely. So thank you all for listening. Please subscribe on SoundCloud. Listen to us on iTunes or
Or Stitcher. Also, I know that 1978 was like more closer to 30 years ago. I just did that. But,
well, yeah, there is a little bit of beer and you're hungover.
yeah,
So tell all your friends about the Grande Bouffe. We're very excited that we're going to have Thelma Adams, the great Thelma Adams, coming up on an upcoming episode. And I did want to remind you all to please turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, or watching a movie.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.